Hello, today is Friday, May 29th. Welcome to episode 601 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Advisory Board member Lester Munson. I'm joined today by senior fellows John Lipsey and Algene Sajari. Folks, we talked about in our 600th episode a couple days ago, we talked about the latest developments in Iran, and we pointed out that our very first episode 7 years ago was about Iran. We're going to talk about Iran again today. It's the big story. That doesn't necessarily mean there's a lot of conclusions and a lot of tying up of narratives in this story, but it is the front page news. There is talk of a memorandum of understanding between U.S. negotiators and Iranian negotiators. Several key administration officials have confirmed this, including the Secretary of the Treasury, Mr. Bessent, who's got some credibility. I would offer. The Iranians have said it's not been approved by their senior most officials. Unclear exactly who that is, by the way. And also, President Trump has not necessarily approved this memorandum of understanding. Also, we have not seen the memorandum of understanding. What we have heard is that it would call for a 60-day ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran, so a continuation of the very successful ceasefire that we have going on today, which just involves just a few violent acts between the two parties. So a continuation of the ceasefire, the gradual opening of the Strait of Hormuz, and the gradual reduction of the U.S. blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Those things would be done in some conjunction with each other, various steps taking place in exchanges. Each party does the things that are necessary to earn the trust of the other. Also, during the 60-day period, there would be a negotiation over the future of Iran's nuclear weapons program. Now, to level set a little bit, and heaven forbid we compare the Trump administration to the Obama administration, but I'm going to do that anyway. When the Obama administration first came up with the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, that was at the conclusion of 2 years of negotiating from 2013 to 2015. And by the way, in 2013, that was the conclusion of several years of preliminary discussions. So this stuff in the past has not happened in 2 months. It's happened in 2 years. That's a factor to consider. Also, we have the existential question in international law of what is a greater good, a memorandum of understanding or a plan of action? John Lipsey, you were counsel to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. You are an authority on these matters. What say you about this nascent memorandum of understanding and its hierarchy in the international law structure? It's a fun Friday, folks. We may be a little irreverent here, and that's okay.
So I'll give preeminence to a memorandum of understanding. It implies a mutual action. It is a shared understanding. This is superior to a sort of joint actions being taken independently, never actually agreed to in order to avoid Senate oversight. However, a few things that you said, narratives not being tied up. I want to talk about narratives for a second and around what's in this deal and what we've heard about it. Look, to your point, we had Scott Bessent playing press secretary yesterday. Did a great job, always does a great job. I've enjoyed watching him, having him and Rubio and JD kind of take to the podium. Those have been good episodes in the series. However, this White House is struggling mightily on the comms front and on the narrative war with Iran as part of the kinetic war. And I think they desperately miss Caroline Leavitt. And it's really, it's having real consequence. It's diminishing the president's support among the key base that he is leaning on and relying on to prosecute this war. It's leaving the appearance that the Iranians are in control of the negotiations and winning the fight. It has led to like mass confusion over what the U.S. objectives are, what victory looks like, what is a win, what isn't. It's just been very damaging on a number of fronts, exacerbated over a number of weeks now. I'm not sure that Caroline Leavitt could have solved all of that, but it certainly would have helped to have your press secretary around. And we saw this this week as well, right? We had what appeared to be a controlled leak by the administration to Axios to try to attempt to describe what's in the memorandum of understanding that may or may not exist and may or may not be agreed to, and they botched their own leak, right? So in their leak, they talk in the Axios report and other reports at the same time. It said that the strait, you described it well, Les, that the strait would ultimately be unrestricted within 30 days. Iran came out immediately and challenged that, and they said they would still maintain this sort of like ambiguous sovereignty over the strait. It said that the Axios report said that sanctions waivers would be granted to allow Iran to sell oil freely, and it appeared to imply that that was going to be an immediate relief of sanctions. And then it said that simply that the first issue to negotiate would be over how to dispose of highly enriched uranium. So that sends some people into a tailspin on two fronts. One, that they're maybe getting oil sanctions relief and only to agree to negotiate rather than actually making any firm commitment or actually giving up stockpiles. And then separately, that they're only getting an agreement around the highly enriched uranium, which of course is something where most people who watch this issue understand that all of the enriched stockpile of uranium needs to be dealt with or disposed of or removed. So then you had Scott Bessent come out and clean up some of that, but not all of it. He reiterated this highly enriched uranium point, but said that sanctions relief would only occur over time. There wouldn't be immediate. And then you had the Wall Street Journal editorial page have to come out and try to clarify again and said it's not just highly enriched uranium, it's all uranium. So anyway, all that to say, in this leak, they were attempting to put out the contours of a deal for the president to gauge reaction, as he likes to do. And how does he gauge reaction when they can't even get the right information out there for people to react to? So once again, chaos on the comms and narrative battlefront. One thing I will take issue with that Wall Street Journal editorial page on is they said that merely trading blockade for blockade, so opening the strait, would offer a way out of the war, but it's no victory. I strongly disagree. If the president is able to reopen the strait, that is a significant victory. That would be a win over the battle for the Strait of Hormuz. That is, we have heard for 3 weeks that Iran now controls the strait for eternity. We will never get it open without military action. That military action would be catastrophic to the region, et cetera, et cetera. The Strait of Hormuz, control of the Strait of Hormuz became as central a factor in the war as the nuclear program. And if he's able to reopen the strait simply by removing the U.S. blockade and sort of agreeing to a negotiations path, that is a huge victory for the United States. Full stop.
Algene, John has given us quite a bit to chew on there. I will go back to one of his earlier insinuations about episodes and performances, and perhaps compare this to, entertainment. And I know that's at some levels inappropriate. This is war; people die. Nevertheless, we're talking about narratives. John implies that there's an entertainment value here, and it does kind of feel like if this were a Netflix series, we'd be dragging a little bit. We'd be like in episode, of season 5. It'd be episode 7 or 8, and you're like, okay, they're just kind of grinding away on some plot points here, and they're not really, the characters aren't developing. These arcs are getting a little stale. Let's get to the conclusion. Personally, I'm ready to move on to the Cuba series, and let's move this thing to Havana and start. Let's start doing some stuff in Spanish and some different cultural touchpoints. Better climate. Algene, are you not entertained, as the Gladiator says? What are your thoughts here?
I am not entertained. To me, it kind of, I was, instead of Netflix, compared to Game of Thrones, which, seasons 1 through 6 were seen as,
Was that, all right, Algene, in fairness, was that Netflix? Or was that?
I said instead of Netflix, I would compare it to Game of Thrones, which is
that's
HBO.
Amazon Prime. Okay.
Right. HBO.
HBO.
But,
all right, totally different.
Right, totally different. But seasons 7 and 8, folks thought we're losing the plot, right? So I would compare it to that. I think it's really concerning that, as John pointed out, the narrative is sort of all over the place. It's not really clear what the mission is, what our objectives are completely, and there's no clarity on what's going on with this MOU. And I want to point to something that did happen this week that we do know about, which is that as we await for the details and more clarity on the MOU, there's some action in Congress. I wanted to flag a major accountability push. Senator Tammy Duckworth is demanding a dedicated inspector general to review the military operations. And Duckworth pointed to a provision in U.S. Code mandating that the chair of the Council of Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency, that they appoint an IG to head oversight of military overseas contingency operations that exceeds 60 days. So I think this is exactly what we need right now, because there is very little clarity around how much this war has costed, what the ultimate end goal is, what's the strategy here. And first of all, I want to point out this is law. So it is federal statute, and that's clear. So if an overseas contingency operation passes 60 days, a formal IG must be appointed. We have officially crossed that 2-month mark, and this is not about politics in my view. I think it's really about upholding the law and forcing some transparency, as the narrative is all over the place, as John has pointed out. Second, I think given the huge price tag of this conflict, and we've seen various estimates, et cetera, I think it's really important to try to protect taxpayer dollars. We all have seen that, in past conflicts, how trillions of dollars vanished into a black box, looking at Iraq and Afghanistan. A dedicated watchdog is really meant to stop fraud, waste, and abuse before it starts. Now we're a bit late because we're over 60 days in, but going forward, our troops and our taxpayers really deserve that financial firewall. I think this is a really good attempt, at least forcing some clarity in some aspect. It's really about also strategic clarity. Right now, the public is sort of in the dark on the real objectives of Operation Epic Fury. And as we await the ceasefire and the MOU, as we await the MOU, the ceasefire is really not a ceasefire. There's still conflict going on. And so I think it's really important to clearly define the mission, evaluate operational accuracy, and ensure that we're not drifting into another endless unconstitutional war. Hopefully the MOU, we get some clarity, and there's, it's signed, and, we get everything we want. Not sure if that's a realistic expectation, but given that the conflict continues as the MOU is being finalized, I think Senator Duckworth's proposal is quite necessary, and it's a sound attempt to bring some clarity and transparency to this conflict. Hopefully the Pentagon will act in good faith on that.
Algene, I appreciate enormously your creativity here and pointing out Senator Duckworth's very interesting gambit. And as much as I appreciate that, I do disagree. There is a IG at the State Department. There's an IG at the Department of War, or the Department of Defense. They can look into these matters. And thus far, the Iran operation is approximately 1% of the cost of Iraq and Afghanistan. So while yes, it is a lot of money, it's nowhere near what we have spent on other adventures. And I, for whatever it's worth, agree with John's level setting of, if we get the Strait of Hormuz open, this in the grand scheme of things is a pretty big win for the United States. We've successfully mowed the lawn down to about a putting green level for the Iranians. They don't have nearly the missile capacity, drone capacity, nuclear weapons capacity that they had a year ago or even 2 months ago. And so that's all to the good for U.S. national security, and I do favor that. Let me reiterate, though, that this narrative is getting a little stale. I am ready for the next thing. I'm getting ready to tune out, and the ratings have got to be going down on this thing. That's my instinct, and that could be for a whole lot of reasons. But I think it's because we're just kind of rolling around on whether there's a memorandum of understanding or not. And we haven't seen any details.
I think we got a couple things coming down the pike for in future series or future seasons of this. We've got in Europe, the gathering in Brussels is going to make some big decisions potentially about how hard they're going to go against Chinese imports and protecting their industry. Could have a big fight brewing between Europe and China, assuming the Europeans can come to consensus, which is a big assumption. We've got, to your point, Cuba. We had the U.S. just reached agreement with Guatemala to allow a lot of activity, it seems, by the United States in confronting the drug cartels in region. So I think we may be going the narco season, 4 or what have you. And I don't remember if that was a Netflix series or not. Les, we'll have to.
Well, and plus we have the additional possible narrative of the unexpected buddy flick between J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. The unexpected pairing. Everyone thought they'd be rivals, but what if they're working together on this thing? Now, wouldn't that be a
what if?
a fun plot development?
Point out something though. I personally don't agree that opening up the strait and agreement on that is a win, because it wasn't an issue before this conflict, and so we're winning at something that we created, right? So I will modestly push back here and say the Strait of Hormuz was an issue back in the 80s when we had the tanker war. Iran has made other moves on the Strait of Hormuz. It's not like it just occurred to them that the Strait of Hormuz is a choke point. They have known this for thousands of years, particularly the last few decades when all the energy resources for the universe are going through there. So this is not as new as some are making it seem. There wasn't a toll before. So anyway, I'm just saying.
There's not a toll now. There is a blockade, but there is not a toll. All right. That's a wrap. Thanks to Grace Trice, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us on Monday, June 1st for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debate shaking up America. We're on YouTube. Check out our channel there for a video of today's episode. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.